The news of the Xerian invasion spread like wildfire through the streets of Earth's bustling metropolises. Citizens huddled around radios and holographic displays, their faces etched with a mix of fear and determination. How dare these alien invaders violate the sacred Earth Treaty, a pact that had preserved peace and cooperation between humanity and its celestial neighbors for over a century. In the pristine laboratories of the Global Space Agency, Dr. Emily Washington, a brilliant astrophysicist in her early 30s, pored over the latest intelligence reports, her brow furrowed with concern. Emily had dedicated her career to the exploration and understanding of the cosmos, driven by a deep-seated curiosity and a steadfast belief in humanity's potential to forge lasting bonds with alien civilizations. The idea that this fragile interstellar harmony could be shattered by the Xerians' reckless aggression filled her with a sense of dread. As Emily reviewed the intercepted transmissions from the invaded colony, her analytical mind began to formulate a plan. The Xerians, with their superior numbers and advanced weaponry, had clearly underestimated the resolve and technological prowess of humanity. If the right countermeasures could be implemented, the tide of the battle could be turned in humanity's favor. Bursting into the office of the GSA's director, Emily presented her findings and her bold proposal. "We have the capability to develop a revolutionary new propulsion system that could give our ships a significant tactical advantage over the Xerians," she argued passionately. "With the right resources and a dedicated team, we could mobilize a fleet that could reach the invaded colony in a fraction of the time it would take the Xerians to reinforce their position." The director, a seasoned military strategist, listened intently, his skepticism gradually giving way to cautious optimism. "If what you're saying is true, Dr. Washington, then we may have a chance to turn the tables on these invaders. However, the development of such a system would require an enormous allocation of resources and the cooperation of our brightest scientific minds. Can you guarantee that it will be ready in time?" Emily's eyes gleamed with unwavering determination. "I can, sir. Give me the resources, and I will deliver a fleet that will change the course of this conflict." Impressed by her confidence and the sheer audacity of her proposal, the director nodded. "Very well, Dr. Washington. You have my full support. Assemble your team and get to work. Time is of the essence." Within hours, Emily had assembled a crack team of engineers, physicists, and computer scientists, all of whom shared her sense of urgency and her unwavering belief in humanity's ability to overcome this formidable challenge. They worked tirelessly, fueled by endless cups of coffee and a relentless drive to succeed. As the days turned into weeks, the laboratory hummed with the sound of cutting-edge technology and the frantic pace of breakthrough after breakthrough. Emily pushed her team to the limit, refusing to accept anything less than perfection. She knew that the fate of her species hung in the balance, and she was determined to deliver a solution that would not only save the invaded colony, but also send a clear message to the Xerians. Humanity would not be trifled with. Finally, after a grueling month of non-stop work, the prototype of the new propulsion system was ready for testing. Emily and her team held their breath as the first experimental craft powered up, its engines roaring to life. Slowly, the ship lifted off the launch pad, its movements smooth and effortless, defying the constraints of traditional spacecraft. As the craft soared through the sky, the team watched in awe, their hearts racing with a mixture of pride and apprehension. If this system worked as intended, it could give humanity the decisive edge it needed to turn the tide of the Xerian invasion. But if it failed, the consequences could be catastrophic. After a nerve-wracking series of maneuvers and stress tests, the results were clear. The new propulsion system was a resounding success. The experimental craft's speed and agility were unparalleled, far exceeding the capabilities of any known spacecraft. Emily's eyes shone with triumph as she presented the findings to the GSA director, who regarded her with a newfound respect and admiration. "You've done it, Dr. Washington," the director said, his voice tinged with awe. "This technology could be the key to reclaiming our colony and defeating the Xerians once and for all. I'll begin the process of mobilizing a fleet immediately." We need to strike while the Xerians are still consolidating their position." Emily nodded, her mind already racing ahead to the next phase of the plan. "I'll coordinate with the military to ensure the fleet is equipped with the latest version of the propulsion system. We'll need the best pilots and the most advanced weaponry if we're going to have any chance of success." As the director hurried off to brief the military leadership, Emily allowed herself a moment of relief. The first step had been taken, but she knew that the true test lay ahead. The invasion of the human colony had shaken the very foundations of the Earth Treaty, and the future of humanity now rested on the success of this mission. Emily was determined to prove that the indomitable spirit of her species was more than a match for the Xerians' ambitions. With a deep breath, she turned her attention back to the task at hand, ready to lead her team in the creation of a fleet that would change the course of history. News of the Xerian aggression had spread across Earth like wildfire, igniting a sense of outrage and determination among the populace. In the halls of power, the planet's leaders convened to discuss the appropriate course of action, their brows furrowed with concern. "This is an unprecedented violation of the Earth Treaty," the Secretary General of the United Nations declared, his voice grave. "The Xerians have shown a blatant disregard for our sacred pact of non-interference and cooperation. We cannot allow this to stand." Around the table, the faces of the assembled diplomats and military commanders reflected a similar sentiment. For over a century, the Earth Treaty had maintained a delicate balance of power, fostering an era of peaceful coexistence and scientific exploration. The idea that this fragile peace could be shattered by the Xerians' reckless actions filled them with a sense of urgency and purpose. "We must act swiftly and decisively," a seasoned general stated, his gaze sweeping the room. "The Xerians have already established a foothold on the colony world. If we do not intervene soon, they may consolidate their position and make it increasingly difficult to dislodge them." "But what can we do?" a young diplomat questioned, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Our military forces are not equipped to engage in an interstellar conflict of this magnitude. The Xerians vastly outnumber us, and their technology may be superior to our own." A hush fell over the room as all eyes turned to the director of the Global Space Agency, who had been silent throughout the discussion. Emily Washington, the brilliant astrophysicist whose revolutionary propulsion system had rekindled humanity's hope, stepped forward, her expression resolute. "We have the means to turn the tide of this conflict," she declared, her voice steady and assured. "The propulsion system my team has developed can give our ships a significant tactical advantage over the Xerians. With the right resources and coordination, we can mobilize a fleet that can reach the invaded colony in a fraction of the time it would take the Xerians to reinforce their position." The diplomats and military leaders exchanged a series of skeptical glances, the weight of Emily's words hanging in the air. Could this truly be the solution they had been seeking? "Dr. Washington, your proposal is certainly ambitious," the Secretary General acknowledged. "But can you guarantee that this technology will be ready in time to make a difference?" Emily met his gaze unflinchingly. "I can, sir. With your full support and the cooperation of the world's leading scientific and military minds, we can have a fleet ready to launch within the next month." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the room, but Emily remained steadfast, her eyes burning with a determined fire. The Secretary General studied her for a long moment, weighing the gravity of her claims against the urgency of the situation. "Very well, Dr. Washington," he said finally. "You have our full support. Assemble your team and work with our military strategists to coordinate the deployment of this fleet. Time is of the essence, and we cannot afford to fail." With a nod, Emily turned and strode from the room, her mind already racing with the details of the plan. She knew that the success of this mission would not only determine the fate of the invaded colony, but also the future of humanity's fragile alliance with the alien civilizations that populated the cosmos. Back in her laboratory, Emily gathered her team of brilliant scientists and engineers, her eyes alight with a renewed sense of purpose. "We've been given the green light," she announced, her voice tinged with a mixture of relief and trepidation. The world's leaders have entrusted us with the task of developing and deploying a fleet that can turn the tide of this conflict. We have 1 month to get it done." The team responded with a flurry of excited murmurs, their hands already moving to their workstations. Emily raised a hand, silencing the chatter. "I know this is an immense challenge, but we cannot afford to fail. The future of our species is at stake. We must push the limits of our technology, our ingenuity, and our determination. Failure is not an option." The team nodded, their expressions hardening with resolve. They knew that the fate of the invaded colony, and perhaps the entire human race, rested on their shoulders. With a renewed sense of purpose, they set to work, driven by the knowledge that their efforts could mean the difference between victory and annihilation. As the days ticked by, the laboratory hummed with the sound of cutting-edge technology and the frantic pace of breakthrough after breakthrough. Emily pushed her team to the limit, refusing to accept anything less than perfection. She knew that the success of this mission hinged on their ability to deliver a fleet that could outmaneuver and outgun the Xerians. With each passing hour, the team inched closer to their goal, driven by a shared determination to prove the superiority of humanity's technological prowess and the indomitable spirit of their species. The fate of the invaded colony hung in the balance, and they were determined to ensure that their contribution would be the catalyst for a decisive victory. As the experimental fleet assembled by Dr. Emily Washington and her team prepared to embark on their mission, the tension in the air was palpable. Gathered in the vast hangar of the Global Space Agency's primary launch facility, the pilots and technicians went about their final checks with a sense of grim determination, knowing that the fate of their homeworld and the invaded colony hung in the balance. Leading the fleet was the charismatic Commander Jackson Briggs, a seasoned veteran whose reputation for bold, decisive action had earned him the respect of his peers and the admiration of the public. Briggs had been handpicked by the military leadership to command this crucial mission, his skills and experience deemed essential to the success of the operation. As Briggs made his final rounds, inspecting each craft and offering words of encouragement to the crews, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the sight of the sleek, powerful vessels before him. The propulsion systems developed by Dr. Washington's team had transformed these ships into formidable weapons, their speed and maneuverability far exceeding anything the Xerians were likely to have encountered. "Remember, we're not just fighting for our colony," Briggs addressed the assembled pilots, his voice carrying a sense of unwavering conviction. "We're fighting for the future of our species, for the very principles that the Earth Treaty was founded upon. The Xerians have shown a blatant disregard for our sovereignty, and we cannot allow that to stand." The pilots responded with a chorus of affirmative shouts, their eyes glinting with a fierce determination. They knew that the success of this mission would not only determine the fate of their comrades on the invaded colony, but also send a clear message to the Xerians and any other alien civilization that dared to challenge the might of humanity. As the fleet prepared for launch, Dr. Washington approached Briggs, her expression a mix of apprehension and hope. "Commander, I've done everything in my power to ensure that the propulsion systems and onboard weaponry will give you and your crew the edge you need against the Xerians, but I can't guarantee that it will be enough." Briggs placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his gaze steady and unwavering. "That's all we can ask for it, Doctor. Your team has given us the tools we need to turn the tide of this conflict. Now it's up to us to put them to good use." With a nod, Emily stepped back, watching as the fleet slowly lifted off the launch pad, their engines roaring to life. As the ships soared into the sky, disappearing into the vast expanse of space, she felt a surge of pride and trepidation. The fate of her species now rested on the shoulders of the brave men and women who had volunteered for this perilous mission. Meanwhile, on the invaded colony world, the Xerian commander, Growlithe, sat in his command center, reviewing the latest reports from his scouts. The invasion had been a resounding success, with the colony's meager defenses easily overwhelmed by the Xerians' superior firepower and numbers. Now the process of subjugating the human population and plundering the planet's resources had begun in earnest. Growlithe, a seasoned military strategist, had little patience for the petty concerns of the inferior species he had encountered. The Earth Treaty, a human construct, held no sway over the Zirian Empire, and he had no qualms about disregarding its tenets in pursuit of his people's expansion. "The humans have been neutralized," he reported to his superiors back on the Zirian homeworld, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Their colony is firmly under our control, and the local population has been subdued. We have begun the process of extracting the planet's resources for the benefit of the Empire." A brief silence followed, and Growlithe could almost feel the approval radiating from the other end of the communication link. "Excellent work, Growlithe," the voice of his superior rumbled. "Continue your operations on the colony world. We will send additional reinforcements to solidify our hold on the region." Growlithe nodded, his mandibles clicking in satisfaction. "It will be done. The humans will not dare to challenge us further. Their pathetic attempts at resistance will be crushed without mercy." As the communication channel closed, Growlithe turned his attention back to the holographic display, monitoring the progress of his forces as they continued their systematic plunder of the colony's resources. The arrogant commander had little inkling of the impending threat that was hurtling through the vastness of space, determined to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. Back on Earth, the members of Dr. Washington's team watched the progress of the fleet with bated breath, their fingers tapping nervously on the consoles as they monitored the craft's performance. Despite the advanced technology that powered the experimental ships, they knew that the true test would come when the human fleet confronted the Zirians on the battlefield. As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the air grew palpable, and Emily found herself holding her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. The fate of the invaded colony, and perhaps the entire human race, now rested on the shoulders of the brave pilots who had volunteered for this perilous mission. All they could do was wait and pray that the technology they had developed would be enough to turn the tide of the conflict. As the human fleet neared the invaded colony, Commander Jackson Briggs could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The experimental ships under his command, powered by the revolutionary propulsion systems developed by Dr. Emily Washington's team, had already demonstrated their superior speed and maneuverability during the journey. Now, he and his crew were about to put those capabilities to the ultimate test. "All ships, report in," Briggs commanded, his voice calm and steady despite the gravity of the situation. One by one, the pilots of the fleet checked in, their voices laced with a mix of nerves and determination. Briggs knew that these were some of the finest pilots humanity had to offer, handpicked for this crucial mission. He had every confidence in their skills, but he also knew that the Zirians would not go down without a fight. "Prepare for battle stations," Briggs ordered, his gaze fixed on the rapidly approaching colony world. "Our primary objective is to drive the Zirians off this planet and secure a safe passage for the colonists. We cannot afford to fail." The pilots responded with a chorus of affirmative acknowledgments, and Briggs watched as each ship took up its assigned position, the crews primed and ready for the impending confrontation. As the human fleet drew closer, the Zirian commander, Growlithe, finally took notice of the approaching ships. His mandibles clicked in a gesture of mild annoyance as he surveyed the small but formidable force that dared to challenge his occupation of the colony. "Dispatch interceptor squadrons immediately," he barked to his subordinates, his eyes narrowing with a touch of concern. "These humans are more persistent than I had anticipated. Ensure that they do not reach the planet's surface." The Zirian fighters scrambled into action, their sleek, angular ships surging forward to meet the human fleet. Briggs watched their approach with a calculating gaze, his fingers hovering over the controls as he waited for the perfect moment to strike. "Hold your fire," he commanded, his voice steely. "Wait for my mark." The Zirian ships closed the distance, their weapons primed and ready to unleash a devastating barrage. Briggs tensed, his eyes narrowing as he tracked the enemy's movements, anticipating their every maneuver. "Now," he shouted, and the human fleet sprang into action, their ships darting and weaving with a grace and speed that caught the Xyrians off guard. The human pilots, their skills honed to perfection, unleashed a withering barrage of laser fire, their shots finding their mark with unerring precision. The Xyrian interceptors, unable to match the human ship's agility, found themselves quickly overwhelmed, their hulls shredded by the relentless assault. Growlithe watched in horror as his forces were decimated, his mandibles clicking in a gesture of disbelief. "Impossible," he growled, his claws digging into the armrests of his command chair. "How can these puny humans possess such advanced technology?" As the Xyrian fighters struggled to mount a coherent defense, the human fleet pressed its advantage, surging forward toward the colony world. Briggs knew that they had to act quickly, before the Xyrians could mobilize their remaining forces to mount a counterattack. "All ships, target the Xyrian ground installations," he ordered, his voice ringing with a sense of urgency. "We need to cripple their ability to maintain their foothold on the colony." The human ships responded with a barrage of precision strikes, their powerful weapons tearing through the Xyrians' defensive emplacements and supply depots. Growlithe watched helplessly as his carefully laid plans began to unravel, his grip on the colony slipping through his claws. "Recall all available units," he bellowed, his voice laced with a desperation that he had never before experienced. "We cannot allow these humans to retake the colony." But it was too late. The human fleet, powered by the revolutionary propulsion systems and the skill of its pilots, had already reached the colony's surface, their ships landing in strategic locations to disgorge their troops and supplies. As the Xyrian forces scrambled to mount a desperate defense, the colonists, who had been living under the oppressive rule of their alien overlords, rose up in a surge of defiant resistance. Fueled by a newfound hope, they joined forces with the human troops, their combined might overwhelming the Xyrian invaders. Growlithe watched in horror as his carefully constructed plans crumbled around him, his mandibles clicking in a gesture of pure rage. The humans, a race he had once dismissed as weak and insignificant, had proven themselves to be a formidable adversary, their technological prowess and sheer determination more than a match for the Xyrians' superior numbers and firepower. As the battle raged on, Briggs and his crew fought with a ferocity born of a deep-seated desire to protect their homeworld and avenge their fallen comrades. The Xyrian forces, once so confident in their ability to crush the human resistance, found themselves on the defensive, their morale rapidly deteriorating in the face of the human onslaught. Growlithe, his grip on the colony slipping, ordered a full-scale retreat, his ships fleeing the planet's atmosphere in a desperate attempt to regroup and mount a counterattack. But the human fleet, their ships powered by the revolutionary propulsion systems, pursued the retreating Xyrians relentlessly, determined to drive them from the system and secure a decisive victory. As the Xyrian ships disappeared into the depths of space, Briggs allowed himself a moment of triumph, his eyes shining with a sense of pride and relief. The human fleet had not only reclaimed the colony, but also delivered a powerful message to the Xyrians and any other alien civilization that dared to challenge the might of humanity. Back on Earth, Dr. Emily Washington and her team watched the unfolding events with a mix of elation and disbelief. Their revolutionary technology had played a pivotal role in turning the tide of the conflict, and they knew that this was just the beginning of a new era of human exploration and expansion. The future, once shrouded in uncertainty, now burned with the promise of a bold new chapter in the annals of human history. As the human fleet pursued the retreating Xyrian ships, Dr. Emily Washington watched the unfolding events with a mixture of relief and trepidation. Back in the bustling command center of the Global Space Agency, her eyes were glued to the holographic displays, monitoring the progress of the battle with a keen analytical gaze. The propulsion systems her team had developed had more than lived up to their expectations, granting the human pilots a significant tactical advantage over their alien adversaries. But as Emily watched the Xyrian forces regroup and mount a desperate counterattack, she couldn't help but feel a pang of concern. "Jackson, you need to be careful," she murmured, her fingers tapping nervously on the console before her. "The Xyrians are regrouping, and they're not going to go down without a fight. On the bridge of the lead human vessel, Commander Briggs acknowledged Emily's warning with a curt nod, his attention focused intently on the unfolding battle. The Xerian ships, their hulls scared and smoking from the relentless human assault, had formed a tight defensive formation, their weapons primed and ready to unleash a devastating barrage. "All ships, prepare for evasive maneuvers," Briggs ordered, his voice cutting through the cacophony of status updates and damage reports. "We can't let them regroup and mount an effective counterattack." The human pilots responded with a flurry of affirmative acknowledgments, their ships darting and weaving through the hail of enemy fire with a grace and speed that left the Xerians struggling to maintain their targeting solutions. As the battle raged on, Dr. Washington found herself caught in a whirlwind of activity, her team of scientists and engineers working tirelessly to provide the fleet with the latest tactical updates and system diagnostics. Their revolutionary propulsion systems were holding up remarkably well under the strain of the intense combat, but Emily knew that they couldn't afford any malfunctions or system failures. "Keep those ships firing, Jackson," she murmured, her eyes scanning the readouts with a practiced eye. "We need to keep the Xerians on the defensive until we can find an opening to deliver the knockout blow." Briggs, his expression etched with a fierce determination, barked orders to his crew, his hands moving deftly over the control console as he orchestrated the intricate dance of the human fleet. The Xerian ships, once so confident in their superiority, were now struggling to maintain their cohesion, their carefully planned formations falling apart under the relentless human assault. "We've got them on the ropes, sir," one of the pilots reported, his voice tinged with a triumphant edge. "Just a little more, and we can break their lines." Briggs allowed himself a fleeting smile, but his focus never wavered. He knew that the Xerians were a tenacious and resourceful foe, and that any moment of complacency could prove to be their undoing. "Keep pushing, everyone," he commanded, his voice cutting through the adrenaline-fueled chaos. "We can't afford to let up now." Back on Earth, the members of Dr. Washington's team watched the battle unfold with bated breath, their fingers tapping nervously on their consoles as they monitored the performance of the experimental propulsion systems. Emily, her eyes fixed on the holographic displays, silently willed the human fleet to prevail, her heart pounding with a mixture of pride and trepidation. "Come on, Jackson," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Show them the true power of humanity." As the battle reached a fever pitch, the Xerian commander, Growlithe, found himself in an increasingly desperate situation. His once formidable fleet had been whittled down to a mere shadow of its former strength, and the human ships, powered by the revolutionary propulsion systems, were proving to be an elusive and deadly adversary. Growlithe's mandibles clicked in a gesture of pure frustration as he watched his subordinates struggle to mount an effective counterattack. The humans, a race he had once dismissed as weak and insignificant, had proven themselves to be a force to be reckoned with, their technological prowess and sheer determination more than a match for the Xerians' superior numbers and firepower. "Impossible," he hissed, his claws digging into the armrests of his command chair. "These humans should not be able to match us in battle. What sorcery have they employed?" As the Xerian commander racked his brain for a solution, the human fleet pressed its advantage, their ships darting and weaving through the chaos of the battle, their weapons unleashing a withering barrage of fire that tore through the Xerian defenses. Briggs, his expression grim but resolute, knew that this was the moment they had been waiting for. With a decisive flick of his wrist, he ordered his fleet to concentrate their fire on the Xerian flagship, the heart of the enemy's command structure. The human ships surged forward, their powerful weapons pounding the Xerian vessel with a ferocity that left Growlithe and his crew reeling. Alarms blared, and the flagship's hull began to buckle under the relentless assault, its shields collapsing like a house of cards. Growlithe, his last desperate attempt to rally his forces crumbling around him, watched in horror as his command ship broke apart, its debris hurtling through the void of space. With their leader gone and their defenses in tatters, The remaining Xerian ships had no choice but to retreat, their tails tucked firmly between their legs. As the human fleet pursued the retreating Xerians, Briggs allowed himself a moment of triumph, his eyes shining with a sense of pride and relief. The battle had been won, and humanity had proven its mettle against a formidable alien adversary. But even as the euphoria of victory washed over him, Briggs knew that the true test was yet to come. Back on Earth, Dr. Washington and her team erupted in a chorus of cheers and celebrations, their hard work and dedication having played a pivotal role in turning the tide of the conflict. But for Emily, the feeling of triumph was tempered by a sense of unease. The Xerians had been defeated, but she knew that the true challenge lay in rebuilding the devastated colony and ensuring that such an invasion could never happen again. The future, once shrouded in uncertainty, now burned with the promise of a bold new chapter in the annals of human history. But at what cost, and what challenges still lay ahead? The human fleet pursued the retreating Xerian ships. A sense of triumph and relief swept through the ranks of the pilots and crew. They had delivered a decisive blow against the alien invaders, reclaiming the colony world and sending a clear message that humanity would not be trifled with. But for Commander Jackson Briggs, the feeling of victory was tempered by a growing unease. He knew that the Xerians, a tenacious and resourceful foe, would not simply slink away and accept their defeat. They would regroup, lick their wounds, and almost certainly return with a vengeance. All ships maintain tight formation, Briggs ordered, his voice cutting through the adrenaline-fueled chatter. We can't afford to let our guard down just yet. The Xerians may have retreated, but I have a feeling they're not done with us. The pilots, their nerves still humming from the intensity of the battle, responded with a chorus of acknowledgments, their ships falling into a tight, disciplined formation as they continued to pursue the retreating Xerian forces. Back on Earth, Dr. Emily Washington and her team watched the unfolding events with a mix of elation and trepidation. The revolutionary propulsion systems they had developed had played a pivotal role in the human fleet's victory, granting the pilots the speed and maneuverability they needed to outmaneuver and outgun the Xerians. But Emily knew that the true challenge was yet to come. The invasion of the colony world had shaken the very foundations of the Earth Treaty, and the future of humanity's fragile alliance with the alien civilizations that populated the cosmos now hung in the balance. "We need to be ready for anything," she murmured, her brow furrowed with concern. The Xerians won't stop until they've regained their foothold on the colony, and they may not be the only ones who see an opportunity in our weakened position. The members of her team nodded solemnly, their fingers tapping nervously on their consoles as they monitored the progress of the human fleet. They had poured their hearts and souls into the development of the propulsion systems, and they knew that the fate of their species now rested on the shoulders of the brave pilots who had volunteered for this perilous mission. As the human ships continued their pursuit, Briggs couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The Xerian fleet, once a formidable presence, had all but vanished, and the eerie silence that had settled over the system only heightened his sense of unease. "Keep your eyes peeled, everyone," he warned, his gaze sweeping the expanse of space surrounding them. "I have a bad feeling about this." No sooner had the words left his lips than the sensor alarms blared to life, alerting the crew to a massive energy signature emerging from the shadows. Briggs felt his heart skip a beat as the massive Xerian mothership materialized before them, its weapons primed and ready to unleash a devastating barrage. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," he barked, his fingers dancing across the control console as he issued a series of rapid-fire orders. "We can't let them pin us down." The human fleet responded with a flurry of activity, their ships darting and weaving through the hail of enemy fire. But even with the propulsion system's enhanced capabilities, Briggs knew that they were outmatched and outgunned. The Xerian mothership, a towering monolith of steel and plasma, was a formidable foe, its devastating firepower more than a match for the human fleet's firepower. Back on Earth, Dr. Washington and her team watched the unfolding battle with a growing sense of dread. They had poured everything they had into the development of the propulsion systems, and now they watched helplessly as their creations were put to the ultimate test. "We have to do something," Emily murmured, her fingers tapping furiously on the console as she searched for a solution. "There has to be a way to even the odds." But as the battle raged on, it became increasingly clear that the human fleet was outmatched. The Xerian mothership's devastating firepower was tearing through their defenses, and despite the best efforts of the pilots, they were slowly but surely being pushed back. Briggs gritted his teeth, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the control console. He refused to accept defeat, his determination burning brighter with every passing moment. If the human fleet was going to have any chance of survival, he knew that they would need to pull off a miracle. "All ships, concentrate your fire on the mothership's main reactor," he ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. "If we can take that out, we might just have a chance." The human pilots responded without hesitation, their ships surging forward in a desperate attempt to penetrate the Xerian vessel's formidable defenses. The battle raged on, a whirlwind of laser fire and evasive maneuvers, as the human fleet fought to keep the mothership's attention focused on them. Back on Earth, Dr. Washington and her team held their breath, their eyes glued to the holographic displays as they monitored the progress of the battle. They knew that the fate of the human colony and perhaps the entire species rested on the outcome of this pivotal confrontation. As the human ships pounded away at the Xerian mothership's reactor, Emily felt a glimmer of hope flare to life within her. If they could just breach the vessel's defenses, they might just have a chance to turn the tide of the battle and secure a decisive victory. But the Xerians were not about to go down without a fight. As the human fleet closed in on the mothership's reactor, the alien vessel unleashed a devastating barrage of fire, its weapons tearing through the human ships with ruthless efficiency. Briggs watched in horror as one by one, the human vessels were destroyed, their pilots fighting to the bitter end. He knew that they were running out of time, and that if they didn't act soon, the battle would be lost. With a deep breath, he steeled his resolve and ordered the remaining ships to make one final desperate push toward the mothership's reactor. It was a gamble, but it was their only chance to turn the tide of the battle and secure a victory for humanity. As the human fleet surged forward, Emily and her team held their breath, their hearts pounding in their chests. The fate of the colony and the future of their species now hung in the balance. The human fleet, battered and bruised, but still defiant, surged forward in one final, desperate push toward the Xerian mothership's reactor. Commander Jackson Briggs gritted his teeth, his knuckles white as he gripped the control console, his eyes fixed on the towering vessel before them. "All ships, target the reactor with everything you've got," he barked, his voice laced with a determination that bordered on recklessness. "We can't let the Xerians win this fight." The remaining pilots responded with a chorus of affirmative acknowledgments, their ships weaving and darting through the hail of enemy fire as they converged on the mothership's vulnerable core. The air crackled with the sound of laser fire and the shuddering impact of Xerian countermeasures, but Briggs refused to be deterred. Back on Earth, Dr. Emily Washington and her team watched the unfolding battle with a mixture of terror and awe. They had poured their hearts and souls into the development of the revolutionary propulsion systems that had given the human fleet its edge, and now they were helplessly witnessing the ultimate test of their creations. "Come on, Jackson," Emily murmured, her fingers tapping nervously on the console as she monitored the fleet's progress. "You can do this. We all believe in you." The human ships, their engines straining to the limit, unleashed a withering barrage of fire upon the Xerian mothership's reactor. The massive vessel shuddered and groaned under the onslaught, its once impenetrable defenses crumbling like a house of cards. Briggs felt a surge of triumph as he watched the reactor's containment field begin to destabilize, its energy signature fluctuating wildly. "Keep it up, everyone," he shouted, his voice rising above the din of battle. "We're almost there." But the Xerians were not about to go down without a fight. As the human fleet closed in, The mothership unleashed a devastating counterstrike, its weapons tearing through the fragile human ships with ruthless efficiency. One by one, the human vessels were destroyed, their pilots fighting to the bitter end. Briggs watched in horror as the fleet's numbers dwindled, his heart sinking with each explosion that lit up the void of space. "Divert all power to the engines," he ordered, his voice laced with a desperate edge. "We have to keep pushing forward, no matter what." The remaining ships surged ahead, their battered hulls trailing smoke and debris as they closed in on the mothership's reactor. Briggs knew that they were running out of time, and that the fate of the colony, and perhaps the entire human race, now rested on the outcome of this pivotal confrontation. As the human fleet reached the pinnacle of its assault, the Xerian mothership's reactor finally buckled under the strain, its containment field collapsing in a brilliant burst of energy. The massive vessel shuddered and groaned, its once formidable defenses disintegrating as the chain reaction spread through its core. Briggs watched in awe as the Xerian mothership was consumed by a series of earth-shaking explosions, its debris hurtling through the void of space. The triumphant roar of the surviving pilots echoed through the communication channels, their voices laced with a mix of relief and disbelief. "We did it," one of the pilots exclaimed, his voice cracking with emotion. "We actually did it." Briggs allowed himself a moment of triumph, his eyes shining with a newfound hope. The human fleet had emerged victorious against the overwhelming might of the Xerian invaders, and the colony world had been reclaimed. But as the initial euphoria began to fade, Briggs knew that the real challenge had only just begun. The Xerians had been defeated, but at a tremendous cost. The human fleet had been decimated, and the fate of the colony's inhabitants hung in the balance. Back on Earth, Dr. Washington and her team erupted in a chorus of cheers and celebrations, their hard work and dedication having played a pivotal role in the human fleet's triumph. But even as the elation swept through the command center, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had been gnawing at her since the start of the battle. "We've won the battle," she murmured, her gaze fixed on the holographic displays that showed the charred remains of the Xerian mothership. But the war is far from over. As the human fleet began the long, arduous process of surveying the damage and securing the colony, Emily knew that the true test was yet to come. The Xerians had been defeated, but their retreat was likely only a temporary setback. They would regroup, lick their wounds, and almost certainly return with an even more formidable force. The future, once shrouded in uncertainty, now burned with the promise of a bold new chapter in the annals of human history. But at what cost, and what challenges still lay ahead? Emily steeled her resolve, her mind already racing with the next phase of the plan. They had proven that humanity was a force to be reckoned with, but she knew that the real battle had only just begun. The Xerians would not give up their ambitions without a fight, and the fate of the human colony, and perhaps the entire species, now rested on their ability to adapt and overcome. As the human fleet began the long journey home, Emily and her team set to work, their determination fueled by the knowledge that the future of their civilization hung in the balance. In the aftermath of the battle, the human fleet's triumphant return to Earth was greeted with a jubilant outpouring of celebration and pride. The news of their decisive victory against the Xerian invaders had spread like wildfire, electrifying the global populace and solidifying humanity's reputation as a formidable force to be reckoned with in the cosmos. As the battle-scarred ships touched down at the Global Space Agency's primary launch facility, throngs of cheering crowds swarmed the landing pads, their voices rising in a thunderous chorus of adulation. Amidst the chaos, Commander Jackson Briggs and his crew disembarked, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and pride. Waiting to greet them was Dr. Emily Washington, her eyes shining with a newfound sense of optimism. As Briggs approached, she clasped his hand in a firm, congratulatory grip. "You and your crew have done an incredible job, Jackson," she said, her voice tinged with genuine admiration. "Without your skill and bravery, we wouldn't be standing here today." Briggs offered her a weary smile, his gaze sweeping the throng of jubilant onlookers. "It was a team effort, Emily," he replied, his voice tinged with a hint of humility. "Your propulsion systems gave us the edge we needed to turn the tide of the battle. We couldn't have done it without you and your team." Emily shook her head, a faint smile playing at the corners of her lips. "The victory belongs to all of us, to the brave pilots who risked their lives, and to the brilliant minds who worked tirelessly to give them the tools they needed to succeed." As the two stepped away from the crowd, Emily's expression grew more pensive, the weight of the challenges that lay ahead weighing heavily on her mind. "The Xyrians have been defeated for now," she murmured, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "But I'm afraid this is only the beginning. They will regroup, and they will return with a vengeance." Briggs nodded in agreement, his brow furrowing with a mixture of concern and determination. "We'll be ready for them, Emily. The fleet may have been decimated, but we've proven that we have the technological prowess and the indomitable spirit to stand up to their aggression." "That may not be enough," Emily countered, her voice tinged with a hint of worry. "The Xyrians are a formidable foe, and they won't stop until they've reclaimed what they've lost. We need to be proactive, to ensure that they can never threaten our colony or our homeworld again." Briggs considered her words, his gaze distant as he contemplated the challenges that lay ahead. "What do you have in mind?" Emily's eyes gleamed with a newfound determination. "We need to expand our presence in the cosmos, Jackson. We need to forge alliances with other alien civilizations, to build a network of support and cooperation that the Xyrians can't hope to challenge." "You're talking about a massive undertaking," Briggs said, his brow furrowing with concern. "The resources and manpower required would be staggering." "I know," Emily replied, her voice laced with conviction. "But we don't have a choice. The Xyrians have shown that they are willing to disregard the Earth Treaty and the principles of peaceful coexistence. If we don't act now, we may never be able to secure our place in the cosmos." Briggs nodded slowly, his mind already racing with the implications of Emily's proposal. "Then we'd better get started. Time is of the essence, and we can't afford to let the Xyrians gain a foothold again." With a renewed sense of purpose, the two set off, their footsteps quickening as they made their way back to the command center. The future of humanity hung in the balance, and they knew that the true test was just beginning. In the days and weeks that followed, the Global Space Agency underwent a dramatic transformation, its focus shifting from exploration and scientific research to a concerted effort to expand humanity's presence in the cosmos. Emily and her team worked tirelessly, developing new propulsion systems and communication technologies that would give the human fleet a distinct advantage in long-range interstellar travel and diplomacy. Simultaneously, Briggs and his battle-hardened pilots began training a new generation of recruits, instilling in them the same determination and skill that had secured victory against the Xyrians. The once decimated fleet was rebuilt and reinforced, its ranks swelling with the most talented and dedicated individuals that humanity had to offer. As the preparations for the impending interstellar campaign progressed, the global populace watched with a mix of awe and trepidation. The Xyrian invasion had shaken the very foundations of the Earth Treaty, and the prospect of further conflict weighed heavily on the minds of the people. But in the face of this uncertainty, a newfound sense of purpose and unity began to take hold. Across the planet, the human race rallied behind the banner of exploration and cooperation, their collective spirit fueled by the knowledge that the fate of their civilization now rested on their ability to forge alliances and secure their place in the cosmos. For Emily, Briggs, and the countless others who had dedicated themselves to this monumental undertaking, the future burned with the promise of a bold new chapter in the annals of human history. The Xyrians had been defeated, but the true challenge had only just begun. As the human fleet set out to confront the unknown, the people of Earth watched with bated breath, their hearts filled with a mix of trepidation and unwavering hope. The fate of their species now rested on the shoulders of those who had proven their mettle against the alien invaders, and the world waited with a sense of anticipation for the day when humanity would once again stand tall, a beacon of strength and resilience, in the vast expanse of the cosmos.